Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Rob Walling with us. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I have to admit, I'm a big fan of yours. I follow what you do online. I
Awesome.
listen to the podcast pretty religiously. But for people that maybe don't know you as well, let me run through a list of some of the many things you're involved with. It's actually hard to know where to start because you do so much. You've developed and grown multiple software products. You're the founder of a conference. You have an online school that you run. You've written a book. You host a great podcast. And you have one of the most popular blogs related to startups on the internet. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, that's a pretty good, pretty good summary. Yeah.
And you haven't slept in what, 5, 6, 7 years?
Yeah, I actually don't work as much as a lot of people think, to be honest. I don't even work full time now. So,
So you work smart.
I do. I have a lot of, I've worked on these things one at a time, and, I don't tackle too much at any given time. And then I have contractors who help me out.
Well, then I definitely want to
So,
know what you know. So I'm glad to have you on
cool.
the program. So
Good.
let's start with your software products. Tell us about some of because you've done a lot of products. Tell us about some of the products that you currently kind of own and operate.
Sure. Yeah, I have, over the past 10 years, I've probably owned somewhere between 15 and 20 different software products. Some of them I built myself, and then they wouldn't work out and I'd shut them down. Others I've acquired from their previous owners. Once I learned how to market, it became a natural fit to then acquire it from people who had put in the hard work of building it. And if I could just add the marketing in, is like a shortcut to a profitable product. So maybe I'll start. I have 5 that I kind of have on my website right now. The website is thenumagroup.com, and that lists all 5 of my software apps that I really public about, and then kind of my teaching side of things. And so in terms of software products, I have a couple that are, well, there's one called Wedding Toolbox, and it's a SaaS app that helps. It's a wedding website builder for consumers, and it's an okay app. It's not something I'm particularly, excited about, but it was something I acquired, and selling to consumers is tough. I don't know if we'll come back to that or not, but it's not something I would do again. Then I have a job board for electricians. It's called apprenticelinemanjobs.com. And again, it's a nice niche. It's profitable, but it's like, I'm not excited about it. And it's not something, it's dealing mostly with consumers. So it's like the pricing is really low. Then I have .NET Invoice, which is it's web-based software written in .NET that helps people invoice. It runs on a server. They download it and install it on theirs. It was my first larger success. They got into the multiple thousands a month in revenue. But it's not a SaaS app, so there's not recurring revenue. And I learned a lesson from that. I will never do a non-subscription app again, ever. I just mark my words, It's just so hard to grow software. It's so hard to grow a business without subscriptions. And so the last 2 are what I've been focusing on for about the past 20 months. hittail.com. I acquired it about 20 months ago, and I've since grown it. I rehabbed it and redesigned it, and then grown it about, I think it's about 15x what it was when I acquired it, 15 to 17x, somewhere in there. And then the last one is Drip, and it's that's at getdrip.com, and it's an email marketing app. It highly focuses on like mini courses and autoresponders and sequences, and it tracks a lot of metrics and stuff that MailChimp and others don't. And so Drip launches right now. We are using it internally, and we have customer number 1 is set to be installed this week. And so we're basically doing customer development on it,
Yeah.
building it from scratch, and set to launch here in the next month or 2.
Yeah, what's so encouraging with what you just said is that because you're so good at marketing, you can acquire a product and make it a success. It just shows really the importance of growth and how it's achievable, it's possible. It's not this mystical thing that can't be done. You do it repeatedly. So that's great. Now, given that you've seen kind of so many products, the 15 or 20 or so that you've done in the last 10 years, do they follow predictable growth patterns? Do they all kind of look the same? Like the first few months looks like this, and then it looks like that? Or is it just all over the map? They all grow in sporadic, crazy, who knew that was going to happen kind of ways?
There are definitely patterns, and that's what I've found looking at all these apps, is that there are these recurring patterns. some of the patterns are that I realized at a certain point the app is never going to grow, like it's never going to scale up. And I saw that with .NET Invoice as an example. And I kept trying to figure out why. And then it's like, well, of course, it's not subscriptions. We start at $0 in sales on the first of every month. And so that pattern led me to say, all right, I'm going to fix it by now only doing subscription apps. And so basically backing into a business model. I don't do B2C anymore because I've had B2C apps and they're a pain. There's a lot of support. You can't charge very much. They're harder to market. Like there's just all of these reasons. And so I don't do B2C. But if you back into a business model and you really go after more like subscription, B2B, put some other factors in place, then yes, there is a predictable growth pattern. It's repeatable and it's a process. And I applied it to Hittail and grew it like I just said, and then I have almost the identical basically game plan that I'm going to be applying to Drip when we launch in 2 months. And so there's basically 3 phases to the growth. There's the build, there's the learning, and there's the scaling. The building is when you're actually writing the code, or in case of Hittail, I acquired it and redid it. So, rewriting code and redesigning and such. And then the learning is once you get a customer involved. So you could still be doing a little coding if you're doing customer development stuff, but with Hittail, the first 5 months was building. The next 6 months for me was learning. And it was like a flat revenue curve during that time. And I was quite frustrated because I kept wanting to grow it. It took me about 5 or 6 months to learn who my customers were, where I could find them, how much I was able to pay for them, what my churn would be, what my lifetime value was. And then once I figured all that out, it's like a switch flipped, and you see the revenue curve. It literally just hockey sticks up, and that's where all the growth happened in like the next 9 months. The first 11 months was spent building and learning, and the next 9 months was spent scaling. And so that's the growth pattern that I see. And of course, there are tactics and such, at a lower level than that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so encouraging to hear that. Talk to me about that middle section, that learning section, because that's the secret sauce if there is one, right?
Yeah,
the build. Right. A lot of people can build. A lot of people can acquire. That's what you learn how to do in a bachelor's CS degree. The learning. That's what people don't know how to do. So when you have Hittail, you're frustrated, you don't know your customer, you don't know your market, you don't know how to reach them yet. What are you doing? What does the playbook look like to learn at that point in time? Yeah,
the key to the learning phase that I've picked up is that you have to do a lot of things that don't scale at all. Premature scaling screws you here because you have to do. So let me give you examples of some things I did that did not scale at all, but that I learned a lot from.
Yeah.
The first thing you do, I think of it as concentric circles, okay? So concentric circle marketing, you might call it, although that's kind of a lame term. But the first thing I did was I went to my audience. So I went to my Twitter people, my people on Facebook. I blogged about it. I mentioned it on our podcast. I emailed my mailing list, and that resulted in it going to the top of Hacker News. Okay, so all that stuff was not scalable. None of that will bring me customers past next week, because it's all this big spike. And it took a lot of time to do that. But I started getting people to use the app, and I started to learn how they were using it, who canceled, how many of them canceled, why they canceled. And I started learning, certain people who, let's just say like people who have SaaS apps who want to, Hittail's like a tool that suggests keywords, right? So people who have SaaS apps or software products are more than willing to pay 10 or 20 bucks a month for these keyword suggestions. People who are like blogging for other reasons were less likely to pay for it. And so right away, all right, boom, I learned something. Next thing I did is I moved out one concentric circle to other people's audience, but it's people who I know. So I know some bloggers, I know some podcasters, I know, just people in the media, right? Or in our world of the media. Mm-hmm. And so I went and did some guest posts. I did a podcast tour where I went on 10 different podcasts. And again, I was watching the traffic that came from Hansel Minutes. Did it convert as well as the traffic that came from Internet Business Mastery or there's one called Internet Marketing that's all about SEO. And I watched that and I started learning, all right, I kind of had a hypothesis, right? I mean, I'm not stupid, but it's like, I bet Hansel Minutes is not going to convert very well because it's a lot of developers, whereas internet marketing is all about SEO. And so I started learning that. So then you expand out, and then I did a guest post on blogs people I didn't know. And during that time, I had Google Alerts going, right? Where it's like you're monitoring people mentioning long tail keywords and stuff, answering questions on Quora and blogs. None of this scales. You cannot scale a business, but that's not the point here. And I spent 6 months basically doing this, but you learn an enormous amount: who signs up, what they want, why they cancel, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm.
So you learn all that stuff, and it's not scalable. So then, how do you make it scalable? Because that's the goal. The goal is to get the hockey stick to where it actually is doing what it does without your input. So how
That's
do you
right.
cross that chasm? Because a lot of people don't learn anything, but even the ones that learn, they still got to make it repeatable.
That's right. That's right. So after the learning, there's this transition period where, and it was even during the learning, I really worked on the funnel, the marketing funnel, so that because if you're bleeding everybody out of your funnel, then you can't scale because you're going to pour money in and it's just going to bleed out the bottom, right? So during that time, I was watching conversions, watching how many people visited, started trials, and how many people went from trial to paid, and then how many people didn't cancel, right? How many people didn't churn. And those numbers were atrocious for the first 3 months of that. And so I went in and did something called Operation Retention, where I emailed everybody who canceled, and I figured out why they canceled, and we fixed all those issues. And it was little things like educating them more during the trial sequence. It was offering a downsell option when they cancel. It was offering to take things off of their to-do list. Like HitTail gives you keywords, and it kind of makes you feel guilty because you're like, well, now I have something to do, right? So meaning like create some content around it. So we offer like a one-click article service now where you click, you get an article in a few days, and we actually remove that item from your to-do list because you paid us a little more, but you now are actually getting value from the product. So it was things like that. There are about 9 or 10 things we did, and churn cut in half. Our trial to paid doubled. That's a 4x switch right there. That is when I knew we were ready to scale. So once I did that, then I started looking at scalable marketing channels, and a few of them are SEO. SEO is a great scalable marketing channel. Paid acquisition, right? Buying ads. I mean, through AdWords, LinkedIn ads, Facebook ads, buy-sell ads. I tried 12 different networks. The 4 that I just mentioned are the 4 best that I know for B2B apps. Then there's content marketing, which is fantastic. If you want to see great examples of people who know how to content market, look at Kissmetrics, look at Crazy Egg, look at Bid Sketch, who you interviewed Ruben Gomez the other day, fantastic content marketer. Those are the big 3. There's another one called integration marketing that I do, which is you integrate with other people, Basecamp, Highrise, Mailchimp, HubSpot, build a WordPress plugin. Those are, I won't say they're not infinitely scalable, but they can bring a lot of new users. So that's kind of the game plan in a nutshell. That's a high level view of it, but that's the game plan that grew HitTail, and that's the game plan I'm going to apply to Drip.
Yeah, and in case people aren't aware of this, you just put on a clinic on how to grow a product.
Yeah,
they need to go back and listen to the last 10 minutes until every sentence of it makes 100% sense, because that is the game plan. I mean, that is what works, and you can do that repeatedly. You can learn, you can scale, you can grow, you can do those kind of things. Now, what do you think about in terms of when you start this marketing process? Do you need the product out there live, out of beta? Do you start it kind of the pre-launch way before? When do you begin the learning? When do you begin the scaling, all those kind of things?
So I believe in marketing before you start writing a line of code, because it's so easy, especially if you're a developer listening to this. I'm a coder. I've been coding since I was a kid, and our inclination is always to build. We want to build. We want to create. And so I tried to actually squash that itch, because that's a natural thing I fall into. Most of us do. And so I believe in the first thing you do is you get a landing page up with an email capture form and a 1 or 2 sentence value proposition. I've done this for a number of products, including a book. My book. Before I wrote a line in my book, I had a landing page. Before we launched our conference, MicroConf, we had a landing page. We hadn't even booked a venue. We had 4 speakers signed on, and we put up a landing page, and we said how many people are going to give us their emails. Because if only 50 will, then we're not going to run the conference because it's expensive. Yeah. And I've done it with Drip. As well. There's a landing page up at getdrip.com right now that has, I've collected 1,300 email addresses, and I believe that you need to do that. You need to get some validation before you invest the months of time. Now, beyond that, I've taken it a step further with Drip specifically. I would not allow. I had a developer who was working for me almost full time at the time, and I said, "You will not write a line of code until I have 10 people who have agreed to pay me $99 a month for Drip." So I emailed 17 different founders. And some were SaaS, some were software. I emailed some kind of information marketer type people. And really quickly, I could see the pattern of who, already I learned. We didn't write a lot of code, but I was getting the learning out of the way. So yes, I wholeheartedly believe if you don't have a launch list of several hundred emails, you have made a wrong turn somewhere. So
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, even with the launch of Growth Hacker TV, I mean, that list has been so invaluable. Those thousands of people that told us ahead of time before I ever did an interview that they would watch interviews,
yep.
and then,
Yep.
they're the ones that we're, working with right now. Now, what do you think about launch dates? When you pick a date and you create buzz around it, it's kind of the date that the product is going to go live. Some people love them, some people hate them. Kind of where do you land on it?
I don't pick like specific launch dates like June 23rd, an arbitrary day.
Mm-hmm.
What I will do though is first I do a bunch of mini launches, I guess you could call it.
Mm-hmm.
So with Drip, I'm going to use Drip as an example a bunch of times just because I'm right in the middle of it. And so it's
Yeah,
perfect.
perfect.
It applies to this. So with Drip, about 3.5 weeks ago, we installed Drip itself on Hittail. Like we are dog fooding it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are customer zero. And we launched to ourselves. And we worked out some bugs, worked out some usability stuff. Then I start going down my list. I now have 16 on that early access list. I said I wanted 10 before we started. Well, since then, we've added 6 because people want in, which is a good sign in my opinion. So now we're adding 1 a week or 2 a week. And we're basically launching individually to each of them. We're contacting via email, hand holding. We actually get on a Google Hangout. It's customer dev, and we're implementing stuff that they need. Then I will have that early bird launch, which is the 1,350 emails that I have right now. And that won't be a particular date that I've set up in advance, but I'll basically send a sequence of maybe 3 emails talking about Drip, talking about why they're on the list, what they were going to get out of it, letting them know that they're going to get a discount if they sign up within the first, probably 3 to 5 days. And then after that, they won't get a discount. And so basically it is a launch, but it's not a launch in terms of we don't launch to everybody at once because I want to learn along the way. I want to learn from those first 16. Then I want to go through another learning phase with those 1,300 to figure out who signs up, why, what they need. That as soon as I get even 50 people in there who I haven't intimately talked with, we're going to have a slew of feature requests. And I want to get those done before I then launch to the world. So I will have a launch date eventually, a public one, where I do blog about it and try to get on Hacker News and TechCrunch and all this other stuff. But that is almost like we should have several $1,000s in revenue before we ever hit that point, And
That's great. I love that quote.
Yeah.
We should have several thousand in revenue before we launch.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
No, and that's so bizarre because most people, months after launch, they don't have several thousand in revenue.
Right.
And so to have it before launch is so awesome. I love that. I can ask you this next question because you've been so successful. You can handle it. What have been some of the biggest mistakes you've made with marketing some of your products? Because I know you've learned a lot just by trial and error.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, that list we could go on. We could have the whole interview just on mistakes. But early on, this is 2002, 2003. Mistakes I made were things like not doing everything I've just said. I didn't do any of that, right?
Okay.
I learned that over. So I didn't do landing pages. I didn't know you could validate beforehand. I went after B2C markets. I thought you had to raise funding in order to launch a software product. And I kept thinking like, well, no one's doing what I'm doing, but there are a lot of us doing this. It's like, it's totally viable. I thought every idea had to be a moonshot, a lottery ticket, right? I'm going to build Facebook for this, or I'm going to build a Dig for that, which is what I built at some point. It never occurred to me, I'm just going to build an interesting idea that helps people and that they're willing to pay money for, because no one was talking about it. There wasn't the community. So those are, on and on. I went B2C, which I won't do again. I went non-recurring. These are all mistakes that I learned.
Yeah, it's so great hearing you go through that list because I feel like I've gone through that list myself and I didn't learn the mistakes from you, but just my own trial and error that now, if it's not recurring, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Those kind of things. Now, you wrote a book called Stay Small, or Start Small, Stay Small. What do you mean by that? How do your companies, your products start small and stay small?
Yeah, the Start Small is all about starting with just yourself and no funding. And just making it happen, not asking anyone for permission, not asking anyone to give you money or to approve a business plan or for you to even have to figure out a pitch, that you can start that small and start at a few $100 a month in revenue or $50 a month in revenue and build from there. The stay small implies you don't have to hire a bunch of employees to make this work. Up until maybe 60, 90 days ago, I had 0 employees. I was my only employee, and I had up to 8 contractors, 8 or 9 working for me in any given month, doing all types of stuff: design, development, virtual assistant, tier 1 email support, anything you can imagine. I actually did hire my first employee, but only he was a full-time contractor for me for 6 months. He wanted to buy a house, and he was 1099, and they wouldn't give him a loan. So I said, well, just W-2. So it's really an arbitrary thing, right?
Yeah.
He's as much of an employee as he was, then. So, but I just don't want people to buy into this myth of you have to grow headcount. Like I have to, in order to have a multi six-figure business or a seven-figure business, you don't need that many people. You can stay small and keep a lifestyle, I'll say. I know lifestyle is a little bit of like some people call it a derogatory thing, but I have 2 kids. I teach one of my kids a couple days a week. Like I work less than full time, and so I'm just a wholehearted believer that if you want to both enjoy your business, you can start small and keep it focused around around helping your customers, but also around keeping a sane lifestyle.
Yeah, that's great. The valley needs more balance, so it's good to hear that kind of input. Now, you have a strong personal brand online, softwarebyrob.com, has a ton of readers. Your podcast, like I said, I listen to it. It's really good content, which is why I listen to it. I learn a lot. But how important has your audience been to the success of your products? And the reason I ask is because some people watching this might say, well, if I had that kind of audience, then I could launch products like that. They might, give themselves out like that, but maybe that's the truth. Maybe they actually do need an audience to do what you've done. How do you see it?
So the number of people in my personal brand audience who have signed up for Hittail is in the tens. It is a minuscule amount. It is the rounding error to my revenue. The growth engines that have grown Hittail have had nothing to do. No, people have no idea who I am that sign up for Hittail. Mm-hmm. Jason Cohen did a talk. Jason Cohen of A Smart Bear and WP Engine. He talked at MicroConf 2 weeks ago in Vegas, and he said that he got 2 signups from his blog when he started WP Engine, right? 2 customers. That's been my experience as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I have products, though. I have a book that's about starting a startup. That is all about my personal brand, right? Mm-hmm. That I sell because of all the stuff of my podcast and the blog. We have the Micropreneur Academy that you mentioned, the online startup school. That, of course, would never run without the podcast and the blog. And same with MicroConf. But those are things that I do, I'll say more for fun. I make more money from my apps than I do, right, from the education stuff. Mm-hmm. So in terms of just building and growing an app, I would not, if you don't have an audience, I would not spend the time to spend 3 years or 5 years to build some kind of audience. I'll say that's a weak excuse. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Go out and do it. Now, there are also, I'll say that with a caveat. I've also seen people do it pretty well. Like Brennan Dunn has an audience of freelancers because he has a newsletter and he has some ebooks that he put out, and then he has a SaaS app that caters to them. That's a pretty cool way to go. But don't feel like you have to get all that in place before you start, right? You can do just an app and grow it. Like Hittail has not. Brennan's essentially doing content marketing, right? He has a funnel of an email to a email newsletter to books to then the SaaS app. Hittail doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. I just haven't done. Content marketing has not been one of the growth engines. So
yeah. No, that's great to hear kind of how that works together. With Growth Hacker TV, I initially had a blog on it, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to post on it, do content, and I will someday because I think it's important. Honestly, I said, okay, take it down, put up a Twitter link. Like right now, Twitter is going to be our content marketing just because there's too much time that I'm spending doing other things that are better growth channels for right now, and later content's going to work its way in, So I like that a lot. Now, you mentioned the Micropreneur Academy. Tell us about that a little bit. One of the many things you do, you run an online school.
Yeah. So that's at micropreneur.com. And basically it's just I'm trying to think out. It's like an online membership website. It's you pay a monthly fee. It's $50 a month. And it has both content in there. Like it's kind of Mike and I, if you listen to the podcast, our podcast is called Startups for the Rest of Us. And Mike and I have created a bunch of content. It's more tactical. It's more in depth. And you get access to new content each month. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where we teach more in-depth stuff that you kind of can't go into on a podcast. So in addition to, I don't know, there's almost 10 books worth of content in there is what it amounts to. It's like hundreds of thousands of words. It's about 10 hours of video screencasts and that kind of stuff. It's about 50, 60 hours of audio. And then, there's about 12 months worth of content. And if you hang around for 12 months, you get grandfathered in and you just have perpetual access, or you can buy the whole shebang for $500 up front. Yeah. And then there's the other side of it is a forum. It's like the community. And that's perhaps probably the most worthwhile part of it is that there are a bunch of people in there doing exactly what I'm talking about, launching with no funding on their own. We're the micropreneurs, we're trying to make this work, starting small and staying small.
Yeah, and when you see all these entrepreneurs coming in to the academy, and so you get to see all their misconceptions, all the wrong-headed thinking, all the things they think are like known truths that have no bearing on reality. What are some of the big misconceptions that people carry in to the academy before you show them the truth?
Yeah, well, a big thing that people think is they wonder if they can possibly do it without raising funding, which is just amazing to me. Now, it was a revelation to me 7 years ago, but that just shouldn't even be on your radar anymore. If I'm not saying funding's bad. There are business models where you need funding, but it's just if you're a lone developer want to launch a product, you can absolutely do it on your own, or a lone designer, or a lone whatever marketer. So that's a big misconception. I think another one is having the kind of the survivor bias thing. So you watch, maybe you read Inc. magazine or Fast Company, or maybe you watch too many Mixergy interviews, and you think that you might even think it's easier than let everyone have success. That all you have to do is launch a product, and you just build some software and launch it, and then you're going to be at six figures in no time. That's the flip side of it, right? That it's too easy, and it's a lot of hard work, and you need a lot more marketing skill than most people realize.
No, that's great advice. Tell us some of these success stories that have come out of the academy, because there's people watching this that might be really interested in going in and being a part of the academy. So brag on it a little bit. What's come out of it?
Sure. Yeah, we actually have a lot. We have I don't have an exact count. Probably there's more than 50 people who have quit their jobs, who've launched products and quit their jobs. So it's awesome. Yeah, there's a long list. I'll just throw out a few. There's a guy named Antonin Hildebrand. He's in Czech Republic. He launched Total Finder and Total Spaces, which are awesome desktop apps for the Mac that help you with Finder stuff. Ruben Gomez, who you emailed or you interviewed a few days ago. It was like a founding member. I mean, he was a charter member. He didn't have a product when he and I met. I started helping him via email, and I told him, "Hey, I'm thinking about building like a site to try to help other people, help more people, And he's like, "Let's do it." And so he was like customer number one for the academy. I kind of built it around his needs, and then he launched and has success and quit his job, within a year of launching. Richard Chen has PHP Grid. He quit his job about 6 months ago. He lives down in LA. Awesome product, awesome dude. Breck Palumbo runs DistressedPro.com. He did a little MicroConf attendee talk. I have at least 10 more I could rattle off, but it's probably
that's awesome. No,
there's
that's
a lot,
awesome.
And that's when I celebrate. I mean, even there's folks who will launch and are making like 10 or 15 grand a month within it takes a couple years to get to that for a lot of folks, but then they keep their job and they just use that money to fund other stuff, like they're going on vacations or they buy things. So that's the fun part. I love it when people really go after it and change their life,
Yeah. No, that's great. Now let's talk about the conference a little bit. You also run MicroConf. Does the conference kind of follow the same theme as your book and as the Micropreneur Academy? Is it sort of the conference for that group?
It is. It's a conference for self-funded startups is what we call it. And last year, I was going to say, but it's 2 weeks ago, there's about 160 people there. Half of them have launched a product and are trying to grow it. And then about 15% have launched and are quite successful. Basically 15 to 20% have launched and don't consult or don't work. They live off their product or more. Some of them have 10 employees. And then the rest is a mix of people who are looking for an idea or have an idea and are working on it. But all self-funded. No one's raising funding. Most of them are there's majority are web and there's some mobile and desktop as well. But yeah, it's definitely for it's similar audience. It's we had probably 50 out of that 160, we probably had 50 Academy members, and the other 110 are just from around the world. People come from New Zealand and Europe and Asia and all that.
Yeah. And now you deal with self-funded entrepreneurs so much. What are kind of the unique difficulties that they have that venture-backed startups don't have? Because it's people don't realize it's almost two different worlds. We call them both startups, but they're different flavors, they're different styles, they're different ways of doing things in the world. So what does a self-funded person have to deal with or put up with or survive through or whatever that maybe their partner on the other side of the fence doesn't have to worry about?
Yeah, I like to say that funded startups collapse or they go out of business when they run out of money. Self-funded startups go out of business when they run out of motivation. So it's a big psychological game as much as with a funded startup. Like you have to keep your motivation up. And what that means is along the way, you need little wins. So you don't have 500 grand or a million sitting in the bank account that the venture capital gave you that you have to scale up. You're sitting there saying, all right, I need to put in 10, 15, 20 hours of my time every week, nights and weekends. That's a huge sacrifice. So that's a big, it is hard. Like it can't be understated how hard it is to work nights and weekends. And it's a big difference between being funded and not. And then the other thing I think is you have to get to revenue so quickly, right? You can't start a social network. Like you can't start Google or Facebook with no funding. So you need to be a little picky about your idea because it has to be something you can directly monetize, right? You have to charge money for it. I don't know. There's probably an exception somewhere, but I don't know of very many at all single founders who self-fund who don't charge money for their product. At least 99 cents in the App Store.
Yeah, no, that's great. You really do have to be selective about the ideas if you're playing this game. It's a different game with different rules, and you just have to obey those rules when you go about it. When's the next MicroConf? You said you just had it recently, right?
Yep. So the next one in the States, well, it'll be in Las Vegas probably next April. And microconf.com is, you can get on the list for that. We sold out in 51 hours this year. So if you are interested in going, get on the list because we didn't even get through that email list before it was sold out. But we're also, because of that demand actually, and because we don't want to grow the size of it, we're having a MicroConf Europe in about 5 months. So in October, early October, we're having one there. So I just started emailing speakers today, but microconfeurope.com. If you're at all interested, we're collecting emails right now, and then we'll be selling tickets in the next month or two.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Rob, this has been an incredible interview. I have one last question for you here. It's kind of a high-level question, and you've answered it, in a dozen different ways already, but I'll end on it anyway. What's the best advice that you have for anyone that's trying to grow a startup?
My advice would be to have early wins. Have some early wins, because without that, you're number one, you're not validating your product. Right? You're not getting validation that someone's going to actually use it or needs it. And number two, you're not getting that motivation to keep you going. If you don't launch, what I've seen is if you don't launch within 4 to 6 months, you will very likely never launch. You'll just shut it down. And so get there quickly and start having someone use it so that you get feedback and you can iterate, because it's both for validating the product, but it's also for your motivation. I see a lot of startups fail because of that.
Yeah. Well, Rob, this has been an excellent interview. Great advice. Thank you again for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.